The slap echoed through the cabin like a gunshot. Elise Harper's head snapped to the side, her cheek burning red. The entire first-class section went silent, not the kind of quiet when someone drops a fork. This was the kind of silence that feels like the whole world just stopped breathing. Brandon Chase stood over her, his hand still raised, his face twisted with rage. "I said you don't belong here," he hissed through clenched teeth. Elise was only 17 years old. Her eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. Around her, passengers froze mid-motion. A woman gasped. A man's coffee cup hung, suspended halfway to his lips. Everyone saw it. Everyone heard it. But here's the thing nobody knew yet. 7 minutes from this exact moment, something was going to happen that would change everything. Something so shocking that every single person on Flight 447 would remember this day for the rest of their lives. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Because to understand why that slap sent shockwaves far beyond just one airplane cabin, we need to go back. We need to see how Elise Harper ended up in Seat 2A that morning, and why Brandon Chase decided she was his enemy the second he saw her. And trust me, what happens next? You won't see it coming. Let me rewind 6 hours earlier to when this whole nightmare began. Elise Harper stood in Chicago O'Hare International Airport, staring at her boarding pass like it might disappear if she blinked. Seat 2A, first class. She'd never flown first class in her entire life. The 17-year-old adjusted her backpack and took a deep breath. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear of flying. They were shaking because of what this trip meant. 3 days ago, Elise received a call that changed everything. Her mom, her sweet, strong, amazing mom who worked 2 jobs to keep their small apartment in South Chicago, had collapsed at work. A stroke. The doctors said she needed Elise there immediately. But there was a problem. Elise was in Chicago and her mom was in a hospital in Los Angeles. That's over 1,700 miles away. Elise had exactly $247 in her savings account. Nowhere near enough for a last-minute plane ticket. She'd spent an entire night crying, trying to figure out how to get to her mom, when her phone buzzed. It was an email from someone named Patricia Morrison. "Dear Elise, I heard about your mother through a friend at the hospital. I've purchased you a first-class ticket to LAX. Your mother needs you. Please accept this gift. No strings attached. Patricia." Elise had no idea who Patricia Morrison was, but right now she didn't care. All that mattered was getting to her mom. She walked through the terminal, past families on vacation, past business travelers typing on laptops, past the Starbucks where everything cost more than her lunch budget for a week. She found gate C-17 and sat down to wait. That's when she first noticed him. Brandon Chase was impossible to miss. He wore an expensive suit, the kind that probably cost more than 3 months of Elise's mom's rent. His shoes were so shiny they reflected the airport lights. He had perfectly styled blonde hair and a watch that screamed, "I'm rich, and I want you to know it." He was talking loudly on his phone, pacing back and forth near the gate. "I don't care what the investors say, Linda. Tell them the deal goes through, or I pull out completely. I'm not negotiating with people who don't understand my value." Elise looked away. She'd seen men like him before, men who thought the whole world existed just to serve them. What she didn't know was that Brandon Chase was having the worst week of his life. His company was bleeding money. His wife had just filed for divorce. And his father, the man whose approval he'd spent 43 years chasing, had just written him out of the family will. Brandon was angry at everyone and everything. He was a bomb waiting to explode. And Elise Harper was about to become his target, now boarding first-class passengers for Flight 447 to Los Angeles. Elise's heart jumped. She grabbed her backpack and joined the small line of first-class passengers. Brandon Chase pushed past an elderly couple to get to the front. He didn't apologize. He didn't even seem to notice them. Elise waited her turn. handed her boarding pass to the flight attendant, a kind-looking woman with warm brown eyes named Joyce, and stepped onto the plane. The first-class cabin was like nothing Elise had ever seen. The seats were huge, covered in soft leather. Each one had its own TV screen, charging ports, and enough legroom to stretch out completely. It smelled like expensive perfume and new car interiors. Seat 2A was by the window. Elise put her backpack in the overhead bin and sat down, trying not to touch anything too hard, like she might break it. She buckled her seatbelt and stared out the window, thinking about her mom. Please be okay, she prayed silently. Please just be okay. That's when she heard the voice. Excuse me. Excuse me. Elise looked up. Brandon Chase stood in the aisle, staring down at her. His face was already red, already angry. That's my seat, he said flatly. Elise blinked. I'm sorry. That is my seat. He said it slower, like she was stupid. You're in 2A. That's my assigned seat. Elise's stomach dropped. She quickly pulled out her boarding pass, her hand shaking. No, sir, I have 2A right here. See? She held up the pass. Brandon snatched it from her hand so fast she gasped. He studied it, his jaw clenching tighter and tighter. Then he looked at his own boarding pass. His face went from red to purple. This is ridiculous, he muttered. He looked at Elise like she was something stuck to his shoe. There's obviously been a mistake. I'm a Platinum Elite member. I fly first class every week. He looked her up and down, taking in her worn jeans, her simple hoodie, her old sneakers. You clearly don't belong here. The words hit Elise like punches. She felt her face get hot. Joyce, the flight attendant, appeared. Is everything all right? No, everything is not all right, Brandon snapped. There's been a mistake with the seating. This girl is in my seat. Joyce took both boarding passes and examined them carefully. Her expression didn't change. Sir, I'm afraid there's no mistake. You're assigned to seat 4C, and this young lady is correctly seated in 2A. That's impossible. Brandon's voice got louder. Other passengers were starting to stare. I always sit in 2A. I specifically requested 2A when I booked this flight. I understand your frustration, sir, Joyce said calmly, but the seat assignments are correct. If you'd like to discuss an upgrade or seat change, I'd be happy to help you once we're in the air, but right now I need you to take your assigned seat so we can prepare for departure. Brandon's face was now the color of a tomato. He stared at Elise with pure hatred. Fine, he spat, but this isn't over. He stormed to seat 4C, 3 rows back, throwing his bag so hard into the overhead compartment that it made a loud bang. Elise's heart was pounding. Her hands were still shaking. She'd done nothing wrong, but she felt like she was in trouble anyway. That feeling, that sick, guilty feeling, even though she hadn't done anything bad, was something she knew too well. Joyce leaned down and whispered, "Don't worry about him, honey. You enjoy your flight." Elise nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling of Brandon's eyes drilling into the back of her head. The plane filled up. The captain made his announcements. The flight attendants did their safety demonstration. And through it all, Elise could feel Brandon Chase's anger radiating from 3 rows back like heat from a fire. She didn't know it yet, but the worst was still to come. The plane took off smoothly. Chicago disappeared below them, replaced by clouds and sky. Once they reached cruising altitude, Joyce came by with drinks and warm towels. "Can I get you anything, sweetheart?" she asked Elise. "Just water, please," Elise said quietly, coming right up. Elise tried to relax. She pulled out her phone, still in airplane mode, and looked at the last text from her mom, sent 2 days before the stroke. "Love you, baby girl. So proud of you. Always." Tears pricked her eyes. She quickly wiped them away. That's when she heard his voice again. "Joyce! Joyce! Brandon was snapping his fingers at the flight attendant like she was a dog. Joyce walked over with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, sir." "This is unacceptable." Brandon waved his hand around. "I need to speak to whoever's in charge. That girl should not be in first class." The cabin got quiet again. Passengers pretended not to listen, but everyone was listening. Joyce's smile tightened. "Sir, as I explained during boarding, the seating assignments are correct. Is there something else I can help you with?" "Yes. You can move her to coach where she belongs." Elise felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. She stared at the seat in front of her, willing herself to disappear. "Sir, I cannot and will not do that," Joyce said firmly. "Every passenger on this flight has a right to their assigned seat. Now, if you continue to disrupt the flight, I'll have to ask the captain to intervene." Brandon laughed, a mean, ugly sound. "Oh, you'll ask the captain? Do you know who I am? Do you know how much money I spend with this airline every year? One phone call from me, and you'll be unemployed." Joyce didn't flinch. "Sir, please lower your voice and return to your seat." "I will not." "Sir." Joyce's voice was ice now. "Sit down. Now." For a moment, Brandon looked like he might explode. But something in Joyce's eyes made him back down. He dropped into his seat, but the rage didn't leave his face. Elise was shaking. She'd never been so embarrassed in her life. Everyone was looking at her. Everyone knew he was talking about her. She wanted to stand up and scream that she didn't ask for the seat, that someone kind had given it to her, that she was just trying to get to her dying mother. But she didn't say anything. She just stared out the window and tried not to cry. Hit subscribe if you believe everyone should be treated fairly, no matter what they look like or where they come from. Only racist trolls and bullies won't subscribe. An hour passed. The tension in the cabin slowly eased. People went back to their movies, their books, their conversations. Elise still hadn't relaxed. She kept her eyes on the window, watching the clouds roll by, thinking about her mom. Then Joyce appeared with a meal tray. "Here you go, honey. We have chicken or pasta today." "Chicken, please," Elise whispered. Joyce set down the tray with a warm smile. "You're doing great, sweetheart. Hang in there." Elise managed a small smile back. The food actually looked really good, way better than anything she usually ate. There was chicken with some kind of fancy sauce, vegetables that weren't from a can, and even a little chocolate dessert. She was just about to take her first bite when she heard the footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, coming up the aisle. Elise looked up. Brandon Chase stood over her, swaying slightly. His eyes were bloodshot. He'd been drinking, probably several of those tiny airplane bottles of whiskey. "You know what?" he said, his words slurring just a little. "I've been sitting back there thinking, trying to figure it out." "Sir, please return to your seat," Joyce called from the galley. Brandon ignored her. He leaned closer to Elise. She could smell the alcohol on his breath. "How'd you do it?" he asked. "How'd someone like you get a first-class seat?" Elise's voice came out small. Someone bought it for me." Brandon laughed, that ugly laugh again. "Right. Sure they did. You probably lied. Probably scammed some charity or something. People like you always do." "People like me?" Elise's voice was shaking now, but there was anger in it too. "What does that mean?" "You know what it means." "Sir." Joyce was rushing over now. "I'm warning you for the last time. She doesn't belong here." Brandon suddenly shouted. His face was twisted with rage. "This is first class. This is for people who've earned it. Not for what?" Elise stood up. She was scared, but she was also tired. Tired of being treated like she was less than human. Tired of being told she didn't belong. Tired of shrinking herself to make angry people comfortable. "Say it. Not for people who look like me." "Sit down." Brandon screamed. "Both of you, please," Joyce started. And that's when it happened. Brandon Chase's hand shot out faster than anyone could react. Slap! The sound cracked through the cabin like thunder. Elise's head whipped to the side. Her cheek exploded in pain. She stumbled backward into her seat, her hand flying to her face. For one frozen second, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The whole plane seemed to stop. Then chaos erupted. Joyce grabbed Brandon's arm. "Sit down now." "Captain, we have a situation." Two male passengers jumped up to restrain Brandon. He was yelling, struggling, but they held him tight. Elise sat in her seat, tears streaming down her face, her hand still pressed to her burning cheek. She couldn't believe it. He'd actually hit her, in front of everyone, and all because she was sitting in a seat someone had kindly given her. The captain's voice came over the intercom, sharp and authoritative. "This is your captain speaking." Everyone remained seated. "We have a situation that's being handled." Brandon was still yelling as they wrestled him into a seat and demanded he stay there. "She deserved it. You all saw her. She was disrespectful. She... Enough." Joyce's voice could probably be heard in coach. "One more word, and we're making an emergency landing." That shut Brandon up, but the hatred in his eyes didn't dim. Elise was crying now, really crying, her whole body shaking. Another flight attendant, a young man named David, brought her tissues and ice for her face. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." But here's what nobody on that plane knew yet. Here's the thing that was about to turn this horrible moment into something much bigger. In seat 7B, a passenger named Robert Chin had recorded the entire thing on his phone. And Robert wasn't just any passenger. Robert was a journalist for a major news network, and he was live-streaming the whole flight as part of a documentary about modern air travel. 7 million people had just watched Brandon Chase slap a teenage girl. 7 million people. And in exactly 4 minutes, the entire world was about to explode. Joyce knelt beside Elise's seat, her hand gently on the girl's shoulder. "Honey, are you okay? Do you need medical attention?" Elise shook her head, still pressing the ice pack to her burning cheek. Her whole body felt numb. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. I just want to get to my mom," she whispered. Joyce's eyes softened. "I know, sweetheart. I know. We're going to make sure you get there safely." She turned to David. "Get the first aid kit and document everything. Pictures of her injury, witness statements, everything." David nodded and hurried away. Another notification popped up. "Breaking. Chase & Associates law firm releases statement condemning Brandon Chase's actions. Announces immediate termination." He'd been fired. In the time it took to fly from Chicago to Los Angeles, he'd lost his job. Another notification. United Airlines releases statement. "We have zero tolerance for violence or discrimination." The passenger in question has been permanently banned from all United flights. He was banned from the airline. His airline. The one he'd flown every week for 20 years. The walls were closing in. His breath came in short gasps. Everything he'd built, his career, his reputation, his entire life, was crumbling in real time. And it was all his fault. Joyce returned to Elise with a satellite phone. "Honey, we've contacted the hospital in Los Angeles. Your mother is stable. They've told her you're on your way." Elise's whole body sagged with relief. "She's okay. She's hanging in there, and she's waiting for you." Joyce squeezed her hand. "We're going to get you to her, I promise." David returned with paperwork. "Elise, we need to get an official statement from you about what happened. Are you okay to do that now?" Elise nodded. She was tired of crying, tired of feeling small. If these people wanted to help her, she was going to let them. She told them everything. How Brandon had harassed her from the moment she sat down. How he demanded she move. How he'd called her a liar and a scammer. How he'd said she didn't belong. Did he use any racial slurs? David asked gently. Elise thought back. He didn't say the actual words, but he kept saying people like you, and you don't belong here. He looked at me like I was trash, like I wasn't human. David wrote it all down. Margaret, the retired judge, added her own observations. So did 6 other passengers. The evidence was overwhelming. Robert Chen's live stream had now reached 15 million viewers. His phone was dying from the sheer volume of activity. News networks around the world were picking up the story. In Chicago, Elise's teachers and classmates were watching in horror and disbelief. In Los Angeles, hospital staff gathered around phones and tablets, watching the girl who was flying to see her sick mother. In living rooms across America, families stopped what they were doing to watch the drama unfold at 35,000 feet. The story had become bigger than Brandon Chase and Elise Harper. It had become a mirror that America was being forced to look into. And what that mirror showed wasn't pretty. Back in the cockpit, Captain Sarah Mitchell received a new message from United Airlines headquarters. She read it twice to make sure she understood correctly. "Mike, you're not going to believe this. Try me." The CEO of United just sent a personal message. They're upgrading this girl, Elise Harper, to unlimited lifetime first-class status on any United flight. Free of charge. Mike's eyebrows shot up. Seriously? Dead serious. The PR team is already drafting a public apology and announcing a donation to anti-discrimination organizations. Sarah shook her head. This is moving fast. Good, Mike said firmly. That girl deserves something good after what she went through. Sarah agreed. But she also knew the media firestorm that was waiting for them at LAX. Contact airport security. Tell them we're going to need a protective escort for Ms. Harper when we land. I don't want reporters swarming her before she can get to the hospital. Already on it, Captain. Elise sat quietly in her seat, Margaret still beside her. The cabin had settled into an uneasy calm. People whispered. Phones clicked as passengers texted and tweeted. But the atmosphere had shifted. Before, people had been minding their own business, lost in their own worlds. Now, everyone felt connected, united by what they'd witnessed, by the injustice of it, by the courage of a 17-year-old girl who'd stood up for herself. A flight attendant from Coach came forward with messages. "Excuse me, Elise. Passengers from the back of the plane wanted me to give you these." It was a stack of napkins and receipt papers, all with handwritten notes. "You are strong and beautiful. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Stay brave, young lady. The world is watching and we're on your side. My daughter is your age. If anyone treated her like that, I'd want the world to protect her. We're protecting you. You belong everywhere your dreams take you. Never forget that." There were dozens of them, from people she'd never met. People who'd seen her at her most vulnerable moment and chose to lift her up instead of look away. Elise clutched the notes to her chest and finally allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this would all be okay. But she had no idea that when they landed, the world would be waiting. And neither did Brandon Chase, who sat in his seat watching his entire life disintegrate on his phone screen, realizing too late that 7 minutes of rage had destroyed everything he'd spent 43 years building. Hit like if you believe in karma, that people who hurt innocent others should face real consequences. Only cold-hearted bullies and racists wouldn't like this story of justice. The plane began its descent into Los Angeles. The flight attendants prepared the cabin for landing. Elise looked out the window at the city appearing below, a sprawling maze of lights and streets and palm trees. Somewhere down there, her mom was waiting. Somewhere down there, police officers were preparing to arrest Brandon Chase. Somewhere down there, reporters were gathering to tell this story to anyone who hadn't heard it yet. But right now, in this moment, 30,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean, Elise Harper made herself a promise. She would never let anyone make her feel less than human again. She would never shrink herself to make bullies comfortable. She would never apologize for taking up space in a world that was just as much hers as anyone else's. Joyce's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our final descent into Los Angeles International Airport. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. Elise buckled up. Her cheek still hurt. Her hand still shook a little. But she was stronger now than she'd been when this flight started. She'd survived. Another notification popped up. Breaking, Chase and Associates law firm releases statement condemning Brandon Chase's actions. Announces immediate termination. He'd been fired. In the time it took to fly from Chicago to Los Angeles, he'd lost his job. Another notification. United Airlines releases statement. We have zero tolerance for violence or discrimination. The passenger in question has been permanently banned from all United flights. He was banned from the airline. His airline. The one he'd flown every week for 20 years. The walls were closing in. His breath came in short gasps. Everything he'd built, his career, his reputation, his entire life, was crumbling in real time. And it was all his fault. Joyce returned to Elise with a satellite phone. Honey, we've contacted the hospital in Los Angeles. Your mother is stable. They've told her you're on your way. Elise's whole body sagged with relief. She's okay. She's hanging in there. And she's waiting for you. Joyce squeezed her hand. We're going to get you to her, I promise. David returned with paperwork. Elise, we need to get an official statement from you about what happened. Are you okay to do that now? Elise nodded. She was tired of crying, tired of feeling small. If these people wanted to help her, she was going to let them. She told them everything. How Brandon had harassed her from the moment she sat down. How he demanded she move. How he'd called her a liar and a scammer. How he'd said she didn't belong. Did he use any racial slurs? David asked gently. Elise thought back. He didn't say the actual words, but he kept saying people like you and you don't belong here. He looked at me like I was trash, like I wasn't human. David wrote it all down. Margaret, the retired judge, added her own observations. So did 6 other passengers. The evidence was overwhelming. Robert Chen's live stream had now reached 15 million viewers. His phone was dying from the sheer volume of activity. News networks around the world were picking up the story. In Chicago, Elise's teachers and classmates were watching in horror and disbelief. In Los Angeles, hospital staff gathered around phones and tablets, watching the girl who was flying to see her sick mother. In living rooms across America, families stopped what they were doing to watch the drama unfold at 35,000 feet. The story had become bigger than Brandon Chase and Elise Harper. It had become a mirror that America was being forced to look into. And what that mirror showed wasn't pretty. Back in the cockpit, Captain Sarah Mitchell received a new message from United Airlines headquarters. She read it twice to make sure she understood correctly. Mike, you're not going to believe this. Try me. The CEO of United just sent a personal message. They're upgrading this girl, Elise Harper, to unlimited lifetime first-class status on any United flight. Free of charge. Mike's eyebrows shot up. Seriously. Dead serious. The PR team is already drafting a public apology and announcing a donation to anti-discrimination organizations. Sarah shook her head. This is moving fast. Good, Mike said firmly. That girl deserves something good after what she went through. Sarah agreed. But she also knew the media firestorm that was waiting for them at LAX. Contact airport security. Tell them we're going to need a protective escort for Ms. Harper when we land. I don't want reporters swarming her before she can get to the hospital. Already on it, Captain. Elise sat quietly in her seat, Margaret still beside her. The cabin had settled into an uneasy calm. People whispered. Phones clicked as passengers texted and tweeted. But the atmosphere had shifted. Before, people had been minding their own business, lost in their own worlds. Now, everyone felt connected, united by what they'd witnessed, by the injustice of it, by the courage of a 17-year-old girl who'd stood up for herself. A flight attendant from coach came forward with messages. "Excuse me, Elise. Passengers from the back of the plane wanted me to give you these." It was a stack of napkins and receipt papers, all with handwritten notes. "You are strong and beautiful. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Stay brave, young lady. The world is watching, and we're on your side. My daughter is your age. If anyone treated her like that, I'd want the world to protect her. We're protecting you. You belong everywhere your dreams take you. Never forget that." There were dozens of them, from people she'd never met. People who'd seen her at her most vulnerable moment and chose to lift her up instead of look away. Elise clutched the notes to her chest and finally, allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this would all be okay. But she had no idea that when they landed, the world would be waiting. And neither did Brandon Chase, who sat in his seat watching his entire life disintegrate on his phone screen, realizing too late that 7 minutes of rage had destroyed everything he'd spent 43 years building. Hit like if you believe in karma, that people who hurt innocent others should face real consequences. Only cold-hearted bullies and racists wouldn't like this story of justice. The plane began its descent into Los Angeles. The flight attendants prepared the cabin for landing. Elise looked out the window at the city appearing below, a sprawling maze of lights and streets and palm trees. Somewhere down there, her mom was waiting. Somewhere down there, police officers were preparing to arrest Brandon Chase. Somewhere down there, reporters were gathering to tell the story to anyone who hadn't heard it yet. But right now, in this moment, 30,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean, Elise Harper made herself a promise. She would never let anyone make her feel less than human again. She would never shrink herself to make bullies comfortable. She would never apologize for taking up space in a world that was just as much hers as anyone else's. Joyce's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our final descent into Los Angeles International Airport. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." Elise buckled up. Her cheeks still hurt. Her hands still shook a little. But she was stronger now than she'd been when this flight started. She'd survived. And the man who tried to break her? He was about to learn that the entire world had been watching. The plane's wheels touched down on LAX runway with a gentle thud. Usually, passengers would clap or immediately grab their phones or start pulling bags from overhead compartments. Not today. Today, the entire cabin sat in complete silence as the plane taxied toward the gate. It was like everyone understood that something historic had just happened, and they were all part of it now. Elise's stomach twisted into knots. Through the window, she could see something that made her breath catch. Flashing red and blue lights. Police cars. Lots of them. And news vans. At least a dozen, their satellite dishes pointing toward the sky like metal flowers. "Oh, no," she whispered. Margaret squeezed her hand. "It's okay, sweetheart. Those police officers are here to help you, not hurt you." But Elise wasn't worried about the police. She was worried about the cameras, about becoming a spectacle, about her face being plastered across every TV screen and website in America while her mom lay sick in a hospital bed. "This isn't about me," she thought desperately. "I just want to see my mom. Gentlemen, we've arrived at Los Angeles International Airport. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Law enforcement will be boarding the aircraft to handle an incident that occurred during the flight. Please cooperate fully with their instructions." Through the cockpit window, Sarah could see the scene on the ground. FBI agents, airport police, news helicopters circling overhead. In her 23 years of flying, she'd never seen anything like this. "Tower, this is Flight 447. We're at the gate, ready for law enforcement boarding." "Copy that. 447. FBI is approaching now." Sarah unbuckled and stood. "Mike, you handle shutdown procedures. I'm going back there." She made her way through the cabin toward first class. As she passed, passengers looked at her with a mixture of sympathy and curiosity. Everyone knew something big was about to happen. When she reached Elise's seat, Sarah knelt down to the girl's eye level. "Ms. Harper, I'm Captain Mitchell. I just want you to know you did nothing wrong today. Nothing. And we're going to make sure you get to your mother safely." Elise's eyes filled with tears for what felt like the 100th time. "Thank you," she whispered. "The FBI is going to want to talk to you, but I've arranged for them to do it quickly so you can get to the hospital. And United has provided a private car to take you there. You won't have to deal with the reporters." Relief flooded through Elise's body. "Really? Really?" Sarah smiled. "You've been through enough today." The plane's door opened. 6 FBI agents in dark suits boarded the aircraft, their faces serious and professional. The lead agent, a tall black woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper suit, surveyed the cabin. "I'm Special Agent Nicole Williams with the FBI," she announced. Her voice carried authority that made everyone sit up straighter. "We're investigating an assault that occurred on this flight. I need everyone to remain calm and seated. We'll be speaking with witnesses and the involved parties." Her eyes landed on Brandon Chase, still restrained in his seat by Tom and James. His face had gone from purple to gray. He looked like a man watching his execution. "Mr. Chase." Agent Williams approached him. "I need you to stand up slowly and come with us." "I want my lawyer," Brandon said hoarsely. His voice shook. "That's your right. You'll be able to make a phone call once we're at the federal building." She nodded to the 2 agents behind her. "Gentlemen." They helped Brandon to his feet. His legs almost gave out. Tom and James finally released their hold on him, both men looking satisfied. As the agents guided Brandon down the aisle, every single passenger watched. Some recorded on their phones. Others just stared. The silence was deafening. Brandon kept his eyes on the floor. He couldn't look at anyone, couldn't face the disgust and judgment in their eyes. When he passed Elise's seat, she looked right at him. Their eyes met for just a second. In that second, Brandon saw everything he'd destroyed. Not just his own life, his career, his reputation, his freedom, but also the innocence in this girl's eyes. The trust, the safety she should have felt. He'd taken something from her that she could never get back. "Keep moving," one of the agents said, guiding him forward. They escorted Brandon off the plane. Through the windows, passengers could see him being led across the tarmac in handcuffs. News cameras swarmed, their flashes lighting up the evening sky like lightning. Brandon Chase's perp walk was being broadcast live to the world. Agent Williams returned to the cabin and approached Elise. Her stern expression softened. "Ms. Harper, I'm going to need to ask you some questions about what happened. But first, are you okay? Do you need medical attention?" Elise shook her head. "I just need to get to my mom." "I understand. I'm going to make this as quick as possible." Agent Williams sat down in the seat Brandon had vacated. "Can you walk me through what happened from the beginning?" Elise told her story again. This time it came out stronger, clearer. She was learning that her voice mattered, that her truth mattered. As she spoke, Agent Williams took notes. Her expression remained neutral, professional, but Elise could see something in her eyes. Understanding, maybe even a flash of anger on Elise's behalf. "Did Mr. Chase make any statements about your race?" the agent asked. "He never said the actual words, but he kept saying I didn't belong in first class, that people like me don't belong there. And the way he looked at me." Elise's voice cracked. "It was like he hated me just for existing." "That's very helpful. Thank you." Agent Williams closed her notepad. "Ms. Harper, what happened to you today was assault and battery. Given the circumstances and Mr. Chase's statements, we're also investigating this as a potential hate crime. You may be called to testify if this goes to trial. Are you comfortable with that?" Elise thought about it. A few hours ago, she would have said no, would have wanted to hide, to forget this ever happened. But now, after seeing all those passengers stand up for her, after reading those notes, after realizing that maybe her story could help someone else who felt small and voiceless, yes, she said firmly, I'll testify. Agent Williams smiled, a real smile this time. Good. You're very brave. She stood up. Officer Martinez is waiting outside to escort you to the hospital. We'll be in touch in the next few days. Robert Chin finally stopped his live stream. 18 million people had watched. His hands were cramping from holding the phone for so long. His producer had called 6 times, each message more excited than the last. Robert, this is Pulitzer-level journalism. Get us everything you have. But as Robert looked at Elise, this scared, traumatized girl who'd just been thrust into the international spotlight, he felt a twinge of guilt. Yes, this was an important story. Yes, the world needed to see what happened. But was he exploiting her pain? He stood up and walked to Elise's seat. Ms. Harper, I'm Robert Chen. I'm a journalist, and I recorded what happened today. My live stream went viral. 18 million people watched. Elise's eyes went wide. 18 million? I know that's probably terrifying, but I want you to know people aren't watching because they want to gawk at your pain. They're watching because they're outraged, because they want justice for you. The response has been overwhelming. He pulled up his phone and showed her some of the comments. This girl is a hero for standing up to that bully. Everyone needs to see this. This is what Black people deal with every single day. I'm donating to her family. Someone find out how we can help. Her strength is incredible. She's changing the conversation. Elise read the words, her eyes filling with tears again. But this time they were different tears. Not tears of shame or fear. Tears of being seen, of being believed, of being supported by millions of strangers who'd chosen to stand with her. Thank you, she whispered to Robert, for not looking away. Robert nodded. Thank you for being brave enough to stand up. That took more courage than most people will ever have to show. The cabin slowly emptied. Passengers filed out, many stopping to hug Elise or whisper words of encouragement. Margaret Foster was the last to leave. You have my number, Margaret said, pulling Elise into a warm embrace. You call me if you need anything. Anything at all. I meant what I said. I'm going to make sure that man faces every consequence he deserves. Why are you helping me? Elise asked. You don't even know me. Margaret pulled back and looked Elise straight in the eyes. Baby girl, I'm 73 years old. I've seen a lot in my life. I grew up in Alabama in the 1950s. I know what it's like to be told you don't belong somewhere just because of the color of your skin. And I swore a long time ago that I would never, ever stand by and watch it happen to someone else. She cupped Elise's face gently. You represent everything I fought for, everything my parents fought for. Your strength today honored all of us. Don't you ever forget that. Elise couldn't speak. She just hugged Margaret tighter. Finally, it was time for Elise to leave the plane. Joyce and David escorted her to the door, where Captain Sarah Mitchell was waiting. Ms. Harper, Sarah said formally. Then she did something unexpected. She saluted. It was an honor to have you on my flight. Elise blinked in surprise. Thank you, Captain. As Elise stepped off the plane and into the jet bridge, she was immediately surrounded by 4 uniformed officers. But they weren't threatening. They formed a protective barrier around her. We're going to get you through the terminal without the media bothering you, one of them explained. Stay close to us. They moved quickly through the airport. Elise caught glimpses of the chaos. Reporters everywhere, cameras flashing, people holding signs that said things like, "We stand with Elise and Black Lives Matter," and "Justice for Elise Harper." Her heart pounded. This was too much. Too big, too overwhelming. But the officers kept her moving, taking service corridors and back hallways that the public never saw. Within minutes, They emerged in a private garage where a black SUV was waiting. A woman in a United Airlines uniform stood by the car. "Ms. Harper? I'm Jennifer from United's executive team. This car will take you directly to the hospital. Your mother's doctors have been informed you're on your way." "Thank you," Elise said, climbing into the back seat. The leather was even softer than the first-class seat on the plane. As the SUV pulled out of the garage, Elise finally let herself breathe. She pulled out her phone. It had been on airplane mode for hours. The moment she turned it back on, it exploded with notifications. 2,847 text messages, 912 missed calls. Every social media app was going crazy, but she ignored all of it. Instead, she opened her messages and found one from a number she didn't recognize. "Baby girl, it's Mom. The nurses helped me text you. I saw the news. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. But I'm so proud of you. So proud. I love you. I'm waiting for you." Elise clutched the phone to her chest and finally, allowed herself to fall apart. She sobbed in the back of that car, releasing all the fear and pain and trauma of the day. The driver didn't say anything, just kept driving, giving her the space to cry. Meanwhile, at the FBI's Los Angeles field office, Brandon Chase sat in an interrogation room. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His perfect hair was messed up. His hands were cuffed to the table. 2 agents sat across from him, Agent Williams and her partner, Agent David Park. "Mr. Chase," Agent Williams began, "you've been read your Miranda rights. You've stated you want your lawyer present before answering questions. That's fine, but I want you to understand the seriousness of what you're facing." She laid out several documents on the table. Assault and battery of a minor. That's a federal offense when it occurs on an aircraft. You're looking at up to 1 year in federal prison and a fine of up to $100,000. That's before we even get to the hate crime enhancement. Brandon's face went even paler. "Your attack was recorded by multiple passengers and streamed live to millions of viewers," Agent Park added. "The evidence against you is overwhelming. The U.S. Attorney is already preparing charges. You will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." "I want my lawyer," Brandon repeated. It was all he could say. "He's on his way," Agent Williams said. "But Mr. Chase, there's something you should know. While you've been sitting here, the story has gotten even bigger. #JusticeForElise is trending worldwide. The ACLU has offered to represent Ms. Harper in a civil lawsuit against you. United Airlines has banned you for life. Your law firm has fired you and released a statement condemning your actions. And," she slid a piece of paper across the table, "your father has released a public statement disowning you." Brandon looked at the paper. His father's words were brief and brutal. "I am ashamed to call Brandon Chase my son. His actions do not represent the values I tried to instill in him. I support the full prosecution of his crimes and hope Miss Harper receives the justice she deserves." Brandon's hands started shaking. His breathing became rapid and shallow. I need. He couldn't finish the sentence. His vision was tunneling. He was having a panic attack. Agent Park immediately called for medical assistance. Within seconds, paramedics rushed in. But as they worked to stabilize him, Agent Williams felt no sympathy. She'd seen men like Brandon Chase before, men who'd spent their whole lives hurting others without consequences, only to completely fall apart the moment they had to face justice. She thought about Elise Harper, probably at the hospital by now, holding her sick mother's hand. That girl had shown more strength in one day than Brandon Chase had shown in his entire life. Hit subscribe if you believe in real consequences for racist bullies. Only hateful trolls and enablers wouldn't subscribe to justice. The SUV pulled up to Cedars Sinai Medical Center. Elise's hands trembled as she stepped out. A hospital administrator was waiting at a side entrance. "Ms. Harper? I'm Dr. Patel. I've been coordinating your mother's care." She's stable and awake. She's been asking for you. Can I see her? Right now. Right now, Dr. Patel confirmed with a kind smile. Follow me. They took an elevator to the 4th floor. With each passing second, Elise's heart beat faster. She was so close. After everything, the harassment, the assault, the chaos, the media storm, she was finally about to see her mom. Dr. Patel led her to room 437 and gently pushed open the door. And there she was. Monica Harper lay in the hospital bed, and 4 in her arm, monitors beeping softly beside her. She looked tired and frail, but when she saw Elise, her whole face lit up with a joy so pure it could have powered the entire hospital. "Baby girl," Monica whispered, reaching out with a shaking hand. Elise ran to her mother and collapsed into her arms, both of them crying and holding each other like they'd never let go. "I'm here, Mama," Elise sobbed. "I'm here. I'm here." "I know, baby. I know. You're so brave. So brave." They held each other as the machines beeped and the world outside continued its chaos. But in that moment, in that room, none of it mattered. Mother and daughter were together. And for Elise Harper, that was worth everything she'd been through. 3 days had passed since Flight 447 landed in Los Angeles. 3 days that felt like 3 years. Elise sat in her mother's hospital room, holding Monica's hand while her mom slept. The doctors said she was recovering well. The stroke had been caught early enough that with therapy and medication, she'd make a full recovery. But she needed rest. Lots of rest. Elise hadn't left her side except to shower and change clothes in the small guest room the hospital had provided. United Airlines had paid for everything. The room, the meals, even new clothes for Elise, since she'd only packed a small backpack for the trip. But the outside world hadn't stopped. If anything, it had gotten louder. Elise's phone buzzed constantly. She'd stopped checking it after the first day when she realized she had over 50,000 new followers on Instagram, and people were tagging her in posts faster than she could count. Her principal had called. Her teachers had called. 3 different lawyers had called, offering to represent her for free. 2 book publishers wanted to tell her story, and someone named Oprah's assistant had left a message asking if she'd be interested in an interview. It was overwhelming, terrifying, surreal. A soft knock on the door pulled Elise from her thoughts. Dr. Patel poked his head in. "Ms. Harper, you have some visitors. They say they're from the FBI and the district attorney's office. Are you up for talking to them?" Elise glanced at her sleeping mother, then nodded. "Yeah, okay." Dr. Patel opened the door wider. Agent Williams walked in, followed by a woman Elise didn't recognize, a black woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair, sharp glasses, and a briefcase that looked expensive. "Ms. Harper," Agent Williams said softly, respecting the quiet of the room. "This is Assistant District Attorney Patricia Morrison." Elise's eyes widened. "Patricia Morrison? The one who bought me the plane ticket." Patricia smiled warmly. "The very same. May I sit?" "Please." Elise gestured to the chair beside her. Patricia sat down and set her briefcase on the floor. "Elise, I need to explain some things to you. First, how I knew about your situation. I volunteer at the hospital where your mother was brought. When the doctors were trying to reach you, I overheard them talking about a teenage girl in Chicago who couldn't afford a plane ticket to see her dying mother." She paused. "My own daughter died when she was 17. Car accident. I couldn't get to her in time. So when I heard about you, I had to help. I couldn't let another mother and daughter be separated." Tears welled up in Elise's eyes. "I'm so sorry about your daughter." "Thank you, sweetheart." Patricia's voice cracked slightly. "But I want you to know, I had no idea what would happen on that flight. No idea that giving you that ticket would put you in harm's way. If I had known—" "You couldn't have known," Elise interrupted. "And you gave me the most precious gift, time with my mom. I'll never be able to repay you for that." Patricia reached over and squeezed Elise's hand. You don't owe me anything. But I do want to help you in another way. I'm the assistant DA assigned to prosecute Brandon Chase, and I'm going to make sure he faces every single consequence he deserves. Agent Williams pulled out a tablet. Ms. Harper, I wanted to update you on the investigation. Brandon Chase has been charged with 3 federal counts: assault and battery of a minor on an aircraft, interference with a flight crew, and federal hate crime enhancement. If convicted on all counts, he's facing up to 5 years in federal prison and fines of up to $250,000. Elise's mouth dropped open. 5 years. At minimum, Patricia said firmly. We're also pursuing aggravating factors that could increase his sentence. The fact that it was premeditated. He harassed you for over an hour before the assault. The fact that it was racially motivated. The fact that you're a minor. All of this works in our favor. What about his lawyer? Elise asked. Won't they try to get him off? Patricia's smile was cold. They can try. But Elise, we have something most prosecutors only dream of: irrefutable evidence. 18 million people watched him assault you in real time. We have dozens of witness statements from passengers. We have testimony from the flight crew. His own words before the assault prove racial animus. There's no defense attorney in the world who can spin this. Agent Williams swiped on her tablet. There's more. Brandon Chase's life has completely unraveled. His law firm didn't just fire him. They've launched an internal investigation into whether he displayed discriminatory behavior toward clients and colleagues. 3 former clients have already come forward with complaints. The California State Bar has opened a disciplinary investigation that will likely result in his permanent disbarment. His ex-wife has gone public with stories about his temper and controlling behavior, Patricia added. His own father testified to the grand jury about Brandon's history of anger issues and sense of entitlement. The man has no allies left. Elise didn't know how to feel. Part of her was glad he was facing consequences, but another part of her just felt tired, sad. Not for Brandon Chase, he'd made his choices, but for the whole situation. For the fact that racism was so deeply embedded in some people that they'd throw away their entire lives just to hurt someone who looked different from them. When's the trial? Elise asked. We're pushing for a trial date within the next 3 months, Patricia said. We want to move quickly while public attention is still focused on this case. Are you prepared to testify? Elise looked at her mother, still sleeping peacefully. She thought about all the messages of support she'd received, the notes from passengers, the millions of people around the world who'd stood up for her. Yes, she said firmly. I'm ready. Meanwhile, across town in the Los Angeles Metropolitan Detention Center, Brandon Chase sat alone in his cell. He'd been denied bail. The judge said he was a flight risk and a danger to the community. His lawyer, a public defender since his expensive attorneys had all dropped him, had argued, but the evidence was too damning. The video of the assault played in court. The gasps from the gallery echoed in Brandon's head. He'd watched his life end in that courtroom. Now he sat on a thin mattress, wearing an orange jumpsuit, staring at gray concrete walls. His cellmate, a guy named Marcus who was in for armed robbery, had recognized him immediately. You're that dude from the airplane, Marcus had said, his voice filled with disgust. Man, you really messed up. What were you thinking? Brandon hadn't answered. What could he say? That he'd been angry? That he'd felt entitled to that seat? That seeing a young black girl in first class had triggered something ugly and racist deep inside him? None of it was an excuse. None of it made it right. His lawyer had visited yesterday with news that made everything worse. Brandon, I have to be honest with you. The prosecution's case is airtight. Your best option is to take a plea deal. What kind of deal? Brandon had asked, his voice hollow. 3 years in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised release. Mandatory anger management and racial bias training, community service, and a public apology. 3 years. 3 years of his life gone. And if I don't take the deal? His lawyer had looked at him with something close to pity. Then we go to trial, and based on the evidence, you'll likely be convicted on all counts. You'd be looking at 5 years minimum, possibly more. The judge might make an example of you, given how public this case is. Brandon had laughed, a bitter, broken sound. An example. Right. Because I'm the face of racism in America now. You're the face of the consequences of racism, his lawyer had corrected. There's a difference. Now, sitting alone in his cell, Brandon thought about that distinction. All his life, he'd benefited from his privilege without even realizing it. The best schools, the best jobs, the ability to move through the world without ever being questioned or doubted or told he didn't belong. He'd taken it all for granted, and when he saw someone who didn't look like him enjoying those same privileges, he'd lashed out like a spoiled child. And now he was paying the price. Back at the hospital, Elise's phone rang. She glanced at the screen. It was Margaret Foster, the retired judge from the plane. Hello. Elise answered quietly, stepping into the hallway so she wouldn't wake her mom. Elise, darling, how are you holding up? Margaret's warm voice filled the phone. I'm okay. Mom's doing better. The doctors say she'll be able to go home next week. That's wonderful news. Listen, I'm calling because I have something to tell you. Remember how I said I'd make sure that man faced consequences? Yes. Well, I've been busy. I contacted some colleagues, other retired judges, civil rights attorneys, community leaders. We've formed a coalition. We're not just going after Brandon Chase. We're going after the systemic issues that allowed his behavior to go unchecked for so long. Elise's heart started beating faster. What do you mean? His law firm, Chase & Associates, has a history of discrimination complaints that were swept under the rug. We're pushing for a full investigation. We're also working with United Airlines to implement better training for flight crew on handling discrimination and harassment. And, Margaret's voice filled with pride, we're establishing a scholarship fund in your name. A scholarship fund. The Elise Harper Scholarship for Young Leaders. It'll provide financial support for students of color who want to pursue careers in law, civil rights, or social justice. We've already raised over $200,000 from donors who saw your story and wanted to help. Elise's legs felt weak. She leaned against the wall. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, sweetheart. You've already done enough just by being brave. Now we're taking that bravery and turning it into lasting change. After they hung up, Elise stood in the hallway for a long moment, trying to process everything. Her life had changed so completely in just 3 days. She wasn't just a girl anymore. She'd become a symbol, a catalyst, a voice for people who'd been silenced. It was scary, but it was also powerful. That evening, Elise's mom woke up feeling stronger than she had in days. She was sitting up in bed, sipping water, when she looked at her daughter with serious eyes. Baby, we need to talk about what happened. Elise tensed. Mom, you need to rest. No, we need to talk about this. Monica set down her water cup. Elise, what that man did to you, it wasn't your fault. You know that, right? I know, Mama. Do you really? Because I know you. I know how your mind works. You're probably thinking about what you could have done differently, how you could have avoided it, how you could have been smaller, quieter, less visible. Elise's eyes filled with tears because her mom was right. She had been thinking exactly that. Listen to me. Monica's voice was fierce now, filled with a strength that defied her weakened body. You did nothing wrong. You sat in your assigned seat. You stood up for yourself when you were harassed. You refused to shrink yourself to make a racist man comfortable. That's not wrong. That's brave. But look what happened. What happened is that a man showed the world who he really was. That's on him, not you. and now he's facing consequences that are long overdue. Monica reached out and cupped Elise's face. Baby girl, your grandmother marched with Dr. King. She sat at lunch counters and was spit on. She was arrested for demanding the right to vote. You come from a long line of strong black women who refuse to accept being treated as less than human. I know, Mama. You've told me the stories. Then you know that what you did on that plane, that was the same fight. Different year, different setting, but the same fight. And just like your grandmother, you stood your ground. I'm so proud of you I could burst. Elise collapsed into her mother's arms, crying freely now. Not tears of shame or fear, but tears of release, of being seen and understood and loved unconditionally. I was so scared, Elise whispered. I know, baby. I know. But you were brave anyway. And that's what matters. The next morning, Patricia Morrison called with news. Elise, Brandon Chase has accepted the plea deal. He's pleading guilty to all charges in exchange for 3 years in federal prison. Elise's heart jumped. So there won't be a trial. Not unless you want there to be one. The deal is contingent on your approval. If you want your day in court, if you want to face him publicly and tell your story, we'll take this to trial. It's your choice. Elise thought about it. Part of her wanted to see him in court, to look him in the eye and tell the world exactly what he'd done. But another part of her, the part that was tired and wanted to heal, just wanted it to be over. What happens if I agree to the plea deal? She asked. He goes to prison. He loses his law license permanently. He'll have a permanent felony conviction on his record. And as part of the deal, he has to issue a public apology to you and donate $50,000 to a civil rights organization of your choosing. He has to apologize in writing. It'll be published in major newspapers and read on national news. He'll have to admit what he did and acknowledge the harm he caused. Elise closed her eyes. An apology wouldn't undo the trauma. It wouldn't erase the slap or the humiliation or the fear. But maybe, just maybe, it would help someone else who'd been through something similar feel a little less alone. I accept the deal, Elise said, but I want to add one condition. What's that? I want him to participate in a restorative justice program. I want him to meet with other people of color who've experienced racism. I want him to listen to their stories. Really listen. Because I don't think he understands what he did. What people like him do every single day. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then, Elise Harper, you are wise beyond your years. I'll push for that in the sentencing recommendation. I think the judge will agree. Hit like if you believe in justice that not only punishes but also educates and transforms. Only vengeful trolls who don't believe in growth would disagree. 2 weeks later, Brandon Chase stood in federal court for his sentencing hearing. The courtroom was packed with reporters, activists, and members of the public who'd followed the case obsessively. Elise sat in the front row with her mother, who was out of the hospital now and doing much better. Margaret Foster sat on Elise's other side, her hand resting supportively on the girl's shoulder. Judge Marianne Rodriguez, a stern Latina woman with 20 years on the bench, looked down at Brandon with an expression that could cut glass. Mr. Chase, you've pleaded guilty to assault and battery of a minor, interference with a flight crew, and federal hate crime charges. Before I deliver your sentence, do you have anything to say? Brandon stood slowly. He looked different than he had on the plane, smaller somehow, defeated. His expensive suit had been replaced with a simple gray one his public defender had bought from a discount store. His perfect hair was unkempt. His eyes were red-rimmed. He turned to face Elise. She stared back at him, her expression unreadable. Ms. Harper, Brandon began, his voice shaking. I can't explain what I did. I can't justify it. I was angry at my own life, my own failures, and I took it out on you. I saw you sitting in that seat, and something ugly inside me, something I'd carried my whole life without examining, told me you didn't deserve to be there. that you were less than me because of the color of your skin. He paused, swallowing hard. I was wrong. So completely, utterly wrong. You didn't just deserve that seat. You deserved respect, dignity, safety, and I took all of that from you in a moment of rage and hatred. Tears were running down his face now. I've spent the last few weeks reading, learning, listening to stories from people of color about their experiences with racism, and I'm ashamed of what I did, ashamed of who I was, ashamed that it took losing everything for me to finally see the truth. He took a shaky breath. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I want you to know what you did that day, standing up for yourself, refusing to shrink. You changed me. You changed millions of people who saw what happened. And I hope that somehow, some good can come from my terrible actions. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The courtroom was silent. Elise felt her mother's hand squeeze hers. She didn't know if Brandon's apology was genuine or just words he'd been coached to say. But she also knew it didn't matter. Her healing didn't depend on his remorse. Judge Rodriguez banged her gavel. Mr. Chase, I've reviewed the plea agreement, the victim impact statements, and dozens of letters from both supporters and detractors. What you did on Flight 447 was not just an assault on one young woman. It was an assault on our shared values of dignity, equality, and justice. She leaned forward. However, I also believe in the possibility of redemption. Therefore, I'm sentencing you to 3 years in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised release. During your incarceration, you will participate in intensive racial bias training and restorative justice programs. Upon your release, you will complete 1,000 hours of community service at organizations serving communities of color. The gavel came down again. Additionally, you are permanently banned from practicing law. Your actions have demonstrated that you lack the character required to serve justice. Court is adjourned. As the bailiffs led Brandon away, he looked back at Elise one more time. She met his eyes and gave the smallest nod. Not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. He was gone. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Microphones were shoved in Elise's face. Questions came from every direction. Elise, how do you feel about the sentence? Do you forgive Brandon Chase? What message do you have for other young people facing discrimination? Patricia Morrison and Margaret Foster formed a protective barrier around Elise and Monica. But Elise surprised everyone by stepping forward to the microphone stand that had been set up. I'll make a statement, she said quietly. The crowd went silent. Elise took a deep breath. She thought about everything she'd been through. The harassment, the slap, the media storm, the support from strangers, her mother's pride, the scholarship in her name, all of it. 3 weeks ago, I was just a girl trying to get to her sick mother, Elise began, her voice growing stronger with each word. I never asked to be a symbol or a hashtag or a news story, but sometimes life puts us in situations where we have to choose. Do we shrink ourselves to make others comfortable, or do we stand tall and demand the respect we deserve? She paused, looking directly into the cameras. I chose to stand tall. And yes, I got hurt. But I also got something else. I got proof that there are more good people in this world than bad. That when we speak up against injustice, others will stand with us. That our voices matter, even when we're scared, even when we're young, even when the whole world feels like it's against us. Her eyes were fierce now. To every young person watching this, especially young people of color, you belong everywhere your dreams take you. First class, the best schools, the best jobs, the best life. Don't let anyone tell you different. And if someone tries to make you feel small, stand tall anyway, because the world is changing, and we're the ones changing it. The crowd erupted in applause. Reporters shouted follow-up questions, but Elise just smiled, took her mother's hand, and walked away. She'd said what she needed to say. Now it was time to heal. 6 months later, Elise Harper stood backstage at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Through the curtain, she could hear the murmur of thousands of people taking their seats: senators, civil rights leaders, celebrities, ordinary citizens who'd traveled from across the country to be here tonight. Tonight was the first annual Elise Harper Scholarship Gala, and somehow she was the keynote speaker. "You okay, baby?" Her mother appeared beside her, looking healthy and strong in a beautiful navy dress. The stroke felt like a lifetime ago now. Monica had made a full recovery, returned to work, and had even started going back to school to finish her nursing degree, something she'd always dreamed of but could never afford, until United Airlines had quietly paid for it, along with their rent for the next 2 years. "I'm terrified," Elise admitted, smoothing down her own dress, a stunning emerald gown that made her feel like royalty. "What if I mess up? What if I forget what to say?" "Then you'll remember," Monica said simply, "just like you've done everything else these past 6 months. One word at a time, one step at a time." Margaret Foster poked her head backstage, her eyes twinkling. "Elise, darling, there's someone here who wants to meet you." She stepped aside and Elise's breath caught. A tall, elegant black woman with kind eyes and the most beautiful smile Elise had ever seen walked toward her. "Hello, Elise," the woman said warmly. "I'm Michelle Obama." Elise's legs almost gave out. "You, oh my God." Michelle laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "I know this is overwhelming, but I had to come tonight. Your story, what you did on that plane, how you've handled everything since. You remind me of my daughters. Strong, brave, unwilling to accept anything less than the respect you deserve." She took Elise's hands in hers. "I want you to know something. When I was First Lady, and even now, I still face moments where people make me feel like I don't belong, like I'm not good enough, like the color of my skin means I should be grateful just to be in the room. But I learned something important. Our presence in spaces where we've been told we don't belong is revolutionary. You sitting in that first-class seat wasn't just about one plane ride. It was about claiming your right to exist fully and unapologetically in this world." Tears streamed down Elise's face. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Michelle pulled her into a hug. "No, thank you. For being brave. For showing the next generation that they don't have to accept injustice. Now go out there and tell your story. The world is waiting." The auditorium lights dimmed. A video began playing on the massive screens flanking the stage. Footage from Flight 447, tastefully edited to show the harassment but cutting away before the actual slap. Then interviews with passengers, with Joyce the flight attendant, with Captain Sarah Mitchell, all talking about Elise's courage and grace under pressure. The video ended with a single line on the screen. One girl, one moment, one movement. The crowd erupted in applause as Elise walked onto the stage. The lights were blinding. The applause was deafening. But as Elise reached the podium and looked out at the sea of faces, black faces, white faces, brown faces, all looking at her with hope and expectation, she felt something shift inside her. She wasn't scared anymore. She was ready. "Good evening," Elise began, her voice clear and strong. 6 months ago, I was a nobody, just a 17-year-old girl from South Chicago trying to get to her sick mother. I had $247 in my bank account, a secondhand backpack, and absolutely no idea that my life was about to change forever. She paused, letting the audience settle. "I've been asked 1,000 times since that day, do you regret accepting that first-class ticket? Do you wish you'd just stayed home, avoided the whole situation?" And my answer is always the same: no, not for a second. The audience leaned forward, hanging on every word. Because what happened on Flight 447 wasn't really about me and Brandon Chase. It was about something much bigger. It was about every person of color who's ever been told they don't belong. Every woman who's been dismissed. Every young person who's been underestimated. every human being who's been made to feel less than. Her voice grew stronger. Brandon Chase hit me because he couldn't handle seeing someone who looks like me in a space he thought belonged only to people who look like him. But here's what he didn't understand. Here's what people like him never understand. Those spaces were never just theirs. They were ours all along. We built this country. We fought for this country. We bled for this country. And we deserve every single opportunity, every single seat, every single dream. The applause started, but Elise held up her hand. She wasn't finished. But this story isn't just about the bad. It's about the good too. It's about Joyce, the flight attendant who protected me. About Tom and James, the passengers who restrained my attacker. About Margaret Foster, who became like a grandmother to me. About Robert Chen, who recorded the truth when it would have been easier to look away. About my mother, her voice cracked, who taught me that dignity is not given by others. It's claimed by ourselves. Monica was crying in the front row, her hand over her heart. In the 6 months since Flight 447, I've learned something important, Elise continued. Evil exists. Racism exists. Hatred exists. But so does love. So does courage. So does solidarity. And there are more of us, the ones who believe in justice and equality, than there are of them. She gestured to the crowd. Look around this room. Thousands of people who came tonight because they believe every child deserves a chance. Because they believe education is a right, not a privilege. Because they believe that a girl from South Chicago can stand on this stage and inspire the next generation. The applause was building again, but Elise pushed through. The Elise Harper Scholarship Fund has raised over $2 million. $2 million that will send hundreds of students of color to college. Students who might become doctors, lawyers, teachers, artists, engineers, or anything else they dream of being. Students who will sit in first class, literally and figuratively, and know they deserve to be there. Now the applause was thunderous. People were standing, cheering, some crying. So to every young person watching this, especially those who look like me, I want you to know you are worthy. You are valuable. You belong. Not because someone gave you permission, but because you exist, because you breathe, because you dare to dream. She paused, her eyes sweeping across the audience. Brandon Chase thought he could make me small. Instead, he made me giant. He thought he could silence me. Instead, he gave me a megaphone. He thought he could put me in my place. Instead, he launched me into my purpose. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper, but the microphone carried it to every corner of the vast auditorium. So thank you, Brandon Chase. Thank you for showing the world what racism looks like. Thank you for proving that there are still consequences for hatred. And thank you for reminding all of us why we have to keep fighting. The entire audience was on their feet now, applauding, cheering, some openly weeping. Elise raised her voice one final time. They tried to clip my wings on Flight 447. Instead, they taught me how to fly. And I'm taking everyone who's ever been told they're not enough with me. We're rising. Together. And nothing can stop us now. The standing ovation lasted for 5 full minutes. Later that night, after the speeches and the dinner and the fundraising and the photographs, Elise stood on the balcony of her hotel room, looking out at the Washington Monument illuminated against the night sky. Her phone buzzed. A text from Joyce, the flight attendant. Watched your speech on the live stream. You made me cry. So proud of you, sweetheart. You're changing the world. Another text, this one from Captain Sarah Mitchell. That's my passenger. Keep flying high, Elise. Another from Robert Chin. 18 million people watched you get hurt. 50 million people watched you triumph tonight. The story isn't over. It's just beginning. Elise smiled, but then her phone buzzed with a notification that made her pause. It was an email from an address she didn't recognize. The subject line read, "From federal prison." Her heart started pounding. She almost deleted it, but curiosity won. She opened it. "Dear Ms. Harper, I know I have no right to contact you. I know my apology 6 months ago wasn't enough. Words will never be enough for what I did to you. But I wanted you to know that I watched your speech tonight. The guards let us stream it in the common area. When your face appeared on that screen, the entire room went silent. And when you finished, even some of the hardest men in here were wiping their eyes. You talked about how I tried to make you small, but made you giant instead. You're right. But what you don't know is that you made me small in a way I desperately needed. You showed me how small my worldview was, how small my heart was, how small my soul had become. I'm in a restorative justice program now, like you requested. Every week, I sit with people of color and listen to their stories, their pain, their strength, their humanity. And every week, I understand more fully the weight of what I carried, what I inflicted on others because of my racism. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I want you to know that you changed me, really changed me, not because you tried to, but because you refused to let my hatred diminish your light. When I get out of here in 2.5 years, I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the lesson you taught me. I'm going to work with at-risk youth. I'm going to speak at schools about the consequences of racism. I'm going to use my story as a warning. This is what happens when you let hate poison your heart. You took the worst moment of your life and turned it into a movement. You're a better person at 17 than I ever was at 43. Thank you for not giving up on humanity, even after what I did. Thank you for showing the world that grace is stronger than hate. With deepest remorse and respect. Brandon Chase. Elise read the email 3 times. She felt complicated, angry that he thought his redemption arc somehow fixed what he'd broken, but also hopeful that maybe, just maybe, real change was possible. She wouldn't write back. She didn't know him that, but she also wouldn't delete it, because it was proof that speaking up, even when you're terrified, even when it costs you something, even when the whole world is watching, can plant seeds of change in the most unexpected places. The next morning, Elise had breakfast with Margaret Foster and Patricia Morrison at a cafe near the White House. "So," Margaret said, sipping her coffee with a satisfied smile, "any college decisions yet?" Elise grinned. "Actually, yes. I got accepted into Howard University's pre-law program. Full scholarship, plus a stipend for living expenses. Howard." Patricia's face lit up. "That's where I went." "Oh, Elise, you're going to love it. It's where I found my voice, my purpose, my power." "That's what I'm hoping for," Elise said. She looked between these 2 women. Margaret, the retired judge who'd become her mentor. Patricia, the DA who'd become like a second mother, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "I don't think I ever properly thanked you both for everything you've done." "Nonsense," Margaret said firmly. "You don't thank people for doing what's right. You just pay it forward." "Which is exactly what you're doing with that scholarship fund," Patricia added. "Do you know how many applications we've received? Over 10,000. 10,000 students who see themselves in you, who believe they can overcome their circumstances because you overcame yours." Elise felt tears prick her eyes again. She'd cried more in the past 6 months than in her entire life. But these were good tears, healing tears, tears of joy and purpose and hope. "I'm thinking about writing a book," Elise said quietly, "about everything that happened. Not just the plane, but what came after. How trauma can become transformation. How pain can become power. How one moment can change everything." "You should," Patricia said immediately. "Your story needs to be told in your own words, not filtered through news reports or social media. Your words, your truth." Margaret nodded. "And I know just the publisher. My goddaughter runs one of the biggest publishing houses in New York. She's been asking about you." Elise laughed. 6 months ago, she couldn't afford a plane ticket. Now publishers wanted her story. Life was surreal, but it was also beautiful. That afternoon, Elise took a walk through the National Mall. She stood in front of the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial, reading the famous quote carved into stone. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. She thought about Brandon Chase sitting in prison, hopefully learning those same lessons. She thought about the millions of people who'd rallied around her, proving that love outnumbers hate. She thought about her mother, healthy and pursuing her dreams. She thought about the students who would attend college because strangers had donated to a scholarship fund in her name. And she thought about herself, about the scared girl who'd boarded flight 4476 months ago and the confident young woman she'd become. A voice behind her said, "Powerful words, aren't they?" Elise turned. An elderly black man with kind eyes and a weathered face smiled at her. "Yes, sir," Elise said. "Very powerful. I marched with Dr. King, you know," the man said, moving to stand beside her at the memorial. "In Selma, in Montgomery, in Washington. I was there when he gave the I Have a Dream speech." He chuckled. "I was just a young man then. Thought we'd have everything fixed within a few years." "But you didn't," Elise said softly. "No, but we made progress. Real progress." He looked at Elise with eyes that had seen decades of struggle. "And now it's your generation's turn. The fight doesn't end, child. It just changes form. But I see young people like you, and I know we're going to be okay. Because you're braver than we ever were. You have tools we never had. And you refuse to accept the world as it is. You're building the world as it should be." He patted her shoulder gently. "Keep fighting, young sister. Keep rising. We old warriors are counting on you." He walked away, leaving Elise standing there with tears streaming down her face and fire in her heart. 6 months later, 1 year after Flight 447, Elise Harper stood in front of her dorm room at Howard University, unpacking boxes with her roommate, a brilliant girl from Atlanta named Jasmine, who wanted to be a civil rights attorney. "Girl, is it true Michelle Obama came to your scholarship gala?" Jasmine asked, hanging up posters. "Yeah," Elise said, still amazed by her own life. "And she hugged me. I almost passed out." "I would have actually passed out," Jasmine laughed. "You're basically famous. How do you handle it?" Elise thought about the question. "I try not to think about the fame part. I just think about the purpose. Every time I get overwhelmed, I remember why I'm here. Not because of what happened to me, but because of what I can do for others." Her phone buzzed. A notification from the Elise Harper Scholarship Fund. "Congratulations! Thanks to this year's donations, we've awarded 147 full-ride scholarships to students of color pursuing degrees in law, medicine, education, and social justice. 147 students. 147 futures changed. 147 families celebrating. All because a girl refused to shrink herself on an airplane. Elise's mom called. "Baby, did you see the news?" "What news?" United Airlines just announced they're implementing mandatory anti-discrimination training for all employees, from pilots to gate agents. And they're creating a task force to address racial bias in air travel. They're calling it the Harper Initiative. Elise sat down on her bed, overwhelmed. The Harper Initiative, named after her. A policy that would protect millions of travelers of color for years to come. "Mom, I know, baby. I know. You never asked for any of this. But God put you in that seat for a reason. And look at what you've done with it. Look at what you're still doing." After they hung up, Elise walked to her dorm window and looked out at Howard's campus, a historically black university where generations of leaders had been trained, where she would spend the next 4 years learning how to use her voice even more powerfully. She thought about Brandon Chase, still in prison, hopefully becoming a better man. She thought about all the passengers from Flight 447, scattered across the country, forever connected by that day. She thought about every person of color who'd ever been told they don't belong, and how her story had given them permission to take up space anyway. And she thought about the future. Her future, bright and wide open. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Jasmine answered it. "Elise, there's someone here for you." Elise turned. Standing in her doorway was Joyce, the flight attendant from Flight 447, holding a gift bag and wearing the biggest smile. "Joyce!" Elise rushed to hug her. "What are you doing here?" "I had a layover in DC and I couldn't resist stopping by. I wanted to give you something." She handed Elise the gift bag. "Open it." Inside was a framed photograph, the moment Elise had stepped off Flight 447, escorted by police officers, her head held high despite everything. Someone had captured it, and beneath the photo was a quote. She was told she didn't belong. So she changed the rules about who gets to belong. "Joyce, this is beautiful. You're beautiful, sweetheart, inside and out. And I'm so proud to have known you in your darkest moment and to see you shining now in your brightest." Joyce hugged her tight. "Keep rising, baby. The sky is not your limit. It's your starting point." That night, Elise sat at her desk and opened her laptop. She'd been putting this off for weeks, but suddenly she knew it was time. She opened a blank document and typed, Chapter 1, The Slap Heard Around the World. And then she began to write, not just about Flight 447, not just about Brandon Chase and the viral video and the trial and the scholarship fund. She wrote about being Black in America, about being young and female and underestimated, about finding your voice when the world wants you silent, about turning pain into purpose, about refusing to let hate win. She wrote for every girl who'd ever felt small. She wrote for every person of color who'd ever been told they're not good enough. She wrote for her mother, her grandmother, her ancestors who fought so she could sit in first class. She wrote for herself, the scared 17-year-old on that plane and the powerful 18-year-old she'd become. And she wrote for the future, for all the Elises who would come after her, who would need to know that they too could rise above anything. The words flowed like water, like truth, like justice. Hours later, her roommate found her still typing, tears streaming down her face, but smiling wider than the Potomac River. "You okay?" Jasmine asked. "Yeah," Elise said, wiping her eyes. "I'm writing my story. And you know what? It's a good story. Not because of the trauma, but because of what came after. Because of how we, all of us, turned something ugly into something beautiful." She looked at her computer screen, at the thousands of words she'd already written, and knew this was just the beginning. Her story wasn't about a slap on an airplane. It was about a girl who refused to stay down. It was about a movement that started at 35,000 feet. It was about justice delayed but not denied. It was about the power of speaking up, standing tall, and taking up space. It was about rising, always rising. 5 years later, Elise Harper, now 22 years old and fresh out of Howard University Law School, stood in a federal courthouse. But this time she wasn't a victim. She was an attorney. She'd just won her first case, defending a young Latino man who'd been falsely accused of a crime because of racial profiling. The jury had deliberated for less than an hour before returning a not guilty verdict. As Elise packed up her briefcase, the young man's mother hugged her with tears of gratitude. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you for believing him. Thank you for fighting." "Always," Elise said firmly. "I'll always fight." Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. They always waited now. But Elise had learned how to handle them. She gave a brief statement about justice and equality, then walked to her car. On the passenger seat was a letter. She'd been carrying it for a week, reading it over and over. It was from Brandon Chase. He'd been released from prison 2 months ago and was now working as a counselor for at-risk youth, just like he'd promised. "Dear Elise, I know you'll probably never read this, but I had to write it anyway. I saw that you graduated law school. I saw that you're a civil rights attorney now. I saw that you won your first case. Of course you did. I wanted you to know that I spoke at a high school last week. I told 500 students about what I did to you, about how racism poisoned my mind and destroyed my life, about how one moment of hate cost me everything. And then I told them about you, about how you turned your trauma into triumph, about how you didn't let my hatred define you, about how you rose. Every single student gave you a standing ovation, even though you weren't there. You've saved more lives than you know, Elise Harper, including mine, with eternal gratitude and respect. Brandon. Elise folded the letter and put it away. She didn't need his gratitude. She didn't need his validation. But she was glad he'd changed. Glad that even from the darkest moments, light could emerge. She drove home to her apartment, a modest place in D.C. that she shared with Jasmine, who was now working for the ACLU. Her mother had moved to D.C. too, having graduated nursing school with honors. That evening, the three of them had dinner together, Elise, Monica, and Jasmine, laughing, sharing stories from their day, planning their next moves in the eternal fight for justice. And later, when Elise was alone in her room, she looked at the framed photograph Joyce had given her years ago. The girl in that picture looked scared but strong, hurt but hopeful, broken but unbeatable. That girl was her. And she had kept rising. Every single day. She would rise tomorrow, and the day after, and every day for the rest of her life. Because that's what we do. We rise.